Hi everyone. This tutorial is going to explain how to set up a glossary for your Moodle. But before we dive in, there are several things that the glossary allows to have happen in your course, and I want to explain just a few of them. First, when you set a glossary up, it's both you and your students who can add words to it. But don't worry, there's an approval process that we'll look at in just a minute. But then once these words are in your glossary, they can automatically be linked to terms wherever it's used in your course. It's a very handy feature for students to refer to and then quickly close out of a pop-up window. And then finally, the glossary words can very easily be inserted into the Games module in your Moodle activities, which we'll look at in the next tutorial. But let's get started at this. In your course, I'm going to turn on the editing. I'm going to scroll down to the block that I want my glossary to appear in. I'm going to go to Activities and then scroll down to Glossary. And I'm going to start by giving my glossary a name and a description. I've titled my glossary Course Vocabulary and gave it a real short description. As we scroll down, you're going to see many other options that you have in setting up your glossary, starting with the number of entries you want per page. Then determine if this is going to be a main glossary or a secondary glossary. You can only have one main glossary, but secondary glossaries throughout your course would allow you to separate course content maybe into units or chapters or something like that. Are you going to allow duplicate entries, and will you allow students to comment on the entries that other kids make? Printer-friendly view is pretty self-explanatory. The automatic link of glossary entries is really a nice feature. Allowing this gives users the option to automatically link their entry wherever that word is used throughout the rest of your course. With that hyperlink, students then can click on it. A pop-up box appears with the glossary entry and a definition, and then they just very quickly close out of it. It's a very nice feature. Next is, how are you going to have your entries be approved? If you select no for this, a waiting approval link will appear when you visit the glossary, and this gives you a nice, convenient place to approve your entries prior to them automatically being posted. Then we get down to several options for display. Depending on the symbols you use, how you want to search, and if you want words to be hyperlinked, will determine how you set some of these options here. And finally, Edit Always allows students to be able to go back and always edit the word that they put into the glossary. If you leave this set as no, the students have about the first 30 minutes or so to go through and make any of the edits that they want. Continue scrolling down, and there's other rating options for grading if you're going to assign a grade to your entries. And then notice here too is where you can hide or show your glossary. If you hide the glossary, all of the links, should they've been hyperlinked, will be hidden as well. So let's save and display this. And this is what it is that you are going to view at this point. But before moving on, I want to point out the option to browse by category. And the reason why I point this out is because this is where you're going to build categories inside of your glossary. The reason why you might want to do this is so that you can start to separate content and unit-specific vocabulary. So after selecting that tab, I'm just going to select that I want to edit categories. I'm going to add a category, and then I'm going to start adding specific categories for my glossary. The category that I'm going to add here is, I'm going to say workout. Notice that I have the option to automatically link this category. I do want that to happen, so I'm going to click yes and then save my changes. You can see that I've already entered a couple of categories, so I'm just going to click back so that we can get back to the point where we can either enter a new word that we're ready to do in the case here, or of course you can jump through and you can browse in other manners. So I'm going to click on enter a new entry, and by the way, this also is what the students will see from their perspective as well. So now I'm going to enter a concept and definition. after I have my concept and definition in. Since my categories have already been added, I can select a category to put that in. I also can hold the control key down on my keyboard and select multiple categories if I needed to do that as well. The keywords is the place where you can add in additional words, but be careful because those words also will be linked throughout your Moodle course as well. Then I want to point out that you can add an attachment. This is a great way of adding an image or a document of additional information pertaining to your specific entry. Finally, you can determine if this entry should automatically be linked, if it is case sensitive, or if the entire word should match before the word itself becomes linked in the course. Be careful with this because, of course, this gets real tricky when you start to talk about plurals and that sort of thing. So I'm going to save changes. I want to show you from the teacher perspective what it looks like to approve a student-submitted entry. Notice in the upper right-hand corner that I have a link now that says there are 2 entries awaiting approval. So I just click Waiting Approval. It will take me to the location where I will see all of my entries that are lined up awaiting approval. I can take a look at the entry and the definition. I can rate the word if I need to do that prior to approving it. And then once I've approved it, it's going to appear in my entire glossary. And I can just keep moving my way down the list and approving the words that I need to approve. This wraps up the glossary tutorial. At this point, pause the tutorial, go back to your own Moodle, and set up a glossary in your own Moodle course. Don't forget to build your categories and submit your entries, but be sure to include at least one picture. We'll use that in the game tutorial, and that's coming up next.